Hey, sports bettor. Yes, you. Guess what? Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for its 28th year of NFL action. So, here's what you got to do. Just click the link below in my description box and sign up today. BetUS.com, where the game begins. Long enough to cover the subject and short enough to keep it interesting. Welcome to Outta My League. I'm Nick Diaz. They do not like Brian Kelly. It's what Ryan Russillo said even on his podcast earlier this week. They do not like Brian Kelly. I don't know why exactly. They just don't, okay? They, meaning everyone outside of LSU, they will look at every single minuscule thing they can do to shift the narrative about how the LSU program is going under Brian Kelly. Just accept this. Just accept it, try your best to ignore it, and move on, okay? Moving on here. How much can Brian Kelly really improve this LSU football team from what he inherited? Well, history usually rhymes. So I went and looked up what Brian Kelly did when he took over the job for the first time at his previous stops, Grand Valley State, Central Michigan, Cincinnati, and Notre Dame. And I looked at what was the record before he got there and what was the record his first year once he took over. So the year before he was promoted from within at Grand Valley State, the team was 10-2. His first year as a 29-year-old head coach, they went 9-3. So it was relatively about the same, but seeing as a first-year head coach at 29 years old, I'm really just going to take a mulligan on that one. Flash forward to about 12 years later. He's at Central Michigan. The year before he was at Central Michigan, they were 3-9. The year after, they were 4-7. So a one-game difference. Then he inherits Cincinnati. The year before, Cincinnati was 8-5. The year that he took over, Kelly went 10-3. So a two-game difference. Notre Dame, the year before, they were 6-6. His first year, Notre Dame was 8-5. So I think it's relatively safe to say that seeing as he inherited a 6-7 LSU football team, I would say that going 7-5 this year, winning a bowl game, having 8 wins, 2 more wins than you had last year, is relatively reasonable. 2 more wins is what he had at Cincinnati, 2 more wins at Notre Dame in his first seasons there. I say 8-5 is a reasonable expectation. More importantly, it's how that 8-5 looks. But how do they get there? A big problem that everyone has in today's world is realizing that something that I've often said in my early years of this podcast, which was both things can be true at the same time. Both things can be true at the same time. It's what people have a hard time realizing. Unfortunately, the social media algorithm that's ruining my life, and probably yours, will not allow it. You're either with us or you're against us. There is no in between. This, of course, is bullshit. LSU can have a poorly coached game. It's true. And still, you can come out and say, you know what? I still think the future is bright. Both things can be true at the same time. You can also say Nussmeier has more potential as a quarterback and a thrower than Jayden Daniels, but you can also realize that Jayden Daniels is the best option for LSU right now, which is what I personally believe. And Brian Kelly said so as much today at the press conference when he was asked if Nussmeier was ever considered to be put in during the Florida State game. He said no. Jayden Daniels is our quarterback 1 right now. And it should be. And the simple fact of why it is A, Jayden Daniels is more experienced. B, Jayden Daniels did nothing to really lose the job on Sunday. He wasn't perfect, but he didn't do anything to lose it. And C, this offensive line is really bad. This O-line is just not good. They're not good. Now, as much as Nussmeier would provide a spark in the passing game, ultimately, there is no way of protecting Nussmeier. Because look, while Nussmeier can run, yes, he's not athletic any more than, say, Max Johnson is athletic. He can run. He can get you a first down and avoid pressure outside the pocket, but they need more than that. And until this offensive line settles down, which who knows if that will ever happen or how long it will happen, you really have no better choice than Jayden Daniels right now. And I have no problem with that. Now, what I said after the game on Sunday was that most, if not all, most of the problems against Florida State were fixable. non-talent issues. Now, I'm not saying they're all going to get fixed, but most of them are fixable. So what are they?
A lot of that is just eye discipline, tackling, better communication from a large degree. I think from an offensive standpoint, earlier recognition in what we had and defining that.
All the things that you would imagine. Most of them special teams, those are very fixable. Tackling, communication, all that stuff. Now, the question becomes, well, why didn't LSU do all of those fixable things against Florida State?
Execution is really playing with great confidence and trusting your teaching. And sometimes in the moment, you lose that trust and you go back to some things that you had done before. And that sometimes is not the best way to do it. So to get better execution, we've got to coach our guys better. And then they have to trust that and play with a great deal of confidence. If we do that, we're going to clean up a lot of those things, and we will.
Bad habits. This team is still learning how to play the way Brian Kelly is teaching them how to play. I saw the team not quit, which is what I saw them do the last 2 years every time they face adversity, which shows you there's buy-in. I didn't see horrible body language, and when I did, it wasn't apathetic body language. It was more frustrating, angry body language, and I actually saw other teammates, like Jaden Daniels towards Keyshawn Boutte, hey, pick yourself up. It's going to be okay. Leadership and accountability on the sidelines when somebody was upset when something wasn't going their way. So I see things moving in the right direction. But here's the thing. The red flag that I saw this offseason that I should have picked up on at the time was back in spring when Brian Kelly and Denbrock said they were a few days that they had to slow down the installation of the offense because the guys weren't picking it up as fast as they wanted them to. Now, maybe that's me overanalyzing in hindsight. Maybe it's just a big old pile of nothing. But it is worth noting that Brian Kelly said he's loved the willingness to change to the culture and the accountability and leadership on the team, but he still isn't liking the execution. That was all during the offseason. Well, that's kind of what you saw during the game. You saw them fight hard till the end, but you saw poor execution for the most part. But to me, when it comes to the offense, I think there's a very simple oversimplification of how to fix the offense. And that's tempo. Tempo is the way for this offense to go. Not just because you saw it work against Florida State in the second half, but also just the lack of diagnosis from the blitzes by Jaden Daniels and the offensive line. They miscommunicated on that. It's protection, calling the right protection against blitzes. Well, that protection call falls on two people. The center, who just started playing center 4 weeks ago, and your quarterback, who was splitting first-team reps the entire offseason. Now, that's not just my opinion. Brian Kelly said so as much during his press conference, what they were doing.
We needed to be in some different protections. It took us a while to recognize some of those things. So we got to do a better job coaching that because, Jaden's very sharp. He understands the offense. So that's something that we'll have to do a better job coaching and making sure that he recognizes that, is able to get us in the right protection, get the ball out quicker, which he did when he saw that later in the game.
Now, a way to combat that is tempo. Because when you run tempo on offense, it makes the defense get more vanilla and easier to diagnose where the blitz is coming from. I will also tell you that former LSU player Gordy Rush, who was talking to the voice of LSU, Tiger Sports' Chris Blair, before the press conference, they do a little sort of a chat and analysis before every press conference, and he was saying in watching the film that what he saw from the offense in the first half against Florida State was not what he saw all offseason in camp. The second half is what they practiced mostly throughout fall camp. It was more tempo, more RPOs, quicker passes, motion sets with tight ends and wide receivers. More of a traditional spread or maybe a more modern spread offense. Now, here's the one thing that you can't fix. All right, you can fix all of those things with time, with reps, with communication, all these things. There's one thing you can't fix. That's the talent at pass blocking, specifically with right tackle. Now, Brian Kelly was asked about how he's going to use the tight ends and the running backs and helping the tackles on pass rush situations to give the quarterback more time. And Brian Kelly said, well, you're not going to like this.
We know where our limitations are. We're going to have to be better there, and we're going to have to be better at the running back position. And we got to be creative. It is what it is.
That's code word for they're not good enough. We don't have a good enough talent at that position, especially at tight end. Now, they have a good pass catcher in Mason Taylor, but he's still a freshman learning how to block. So, in the meantime, what do? Well, you keep doing the things that they did with the offense. You roll Jaden Daniels outside the pocket. You get quicker passes. You go tempo. All that stuff helps. Or you also do, and probably will continue to do, move the offensive line around until you find a better combination at that spot. Those are solutions. Whether or not they work, we'll see. Another thing you do is commit to the run game. Now, as much criticism as I will give the offensive line, and it's deserved, I really liked what I saw from the interior of the offensive line and some run blocking. I love the size of Frazier. I love the size of Dellinger at center, and I love Bradford as a run blocker, okay? Guards are so important in the run game. And really, being good at running the ball really just starts with commitment. You have to commit to running the football. Sometimes you just have to run into a brick wall over and over and over again in order to tear it down if you really want to be good at it. But I saw some plays in there against Florida State where I saw some holes and there was some movement on the line of scrimmage up the middle. Now, speaking of the line of scrimmage, Mason Taylor is out for the season. I'm not going to cry over spilled milk. It sucks how it happened, but he'll be back. In the meantime, Brian Kelly said that now that Mason Smith is out of the defensive front, they will have to be more multiple in their packages, which is something Matt House was going to do anyway, but now you have to do it a little bit more so. And I'm not necessarily concerned about that position because the D-line still has a lot of talent. It can be very effective this season. They just may not be as effective when you have arguably the best interior defensive lineman in the Southeastern Conference. It is what it is, but you can still be effective and good at that spot. But the last thing we'll talk about, and I got a lot of questions about this, linebacker. I don't know how much better they can be the rest of the season based on what I saw, but what I will tell you is what I saw against Florida State with Mike Jones. I saw him play way more aggressive last season towards the end. I also saw Micah Baskerville play way more aggressive last season. He didn't really play a lot against Florida State, but I expect him to later this season. Maybe this is just a hesitation thing that Brian Kelly talked about with getting comfortable with the execution and the new way of playing and the new scheme. Maybe that's all it is, because I saw better play out of Mike Jones and Micah Baskerville last season. Either way, what I do expect is true freshman Harold Perkins to be a main starter at some point towards mid to late season. He's too talented, and I think there's just not enough depth to hold him back. He will be a starter at some point this season.
Thanks for listening to Out of My League. If you like what you heard, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.
Or follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok in the description link below.